Welcome to Dark Seduction Stories, a world where shadows hold secrets and forbidden desires ignite in the darkness. Each story here will pull you into atmospheric tales of dangerous love, powerful obsessions, and the kind of romance that changes everything. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. If you crave more dark, immersive romance that lingers long after the final word, subscribe and join us in the shadows. The storm rolled in from the Atlantic like a living thing, dark and furious, swallowing the last remnants of daylight. Emma Castellano stood at the window of the keeper's cottage, watching the waves hurl themselves against the rocks below, and wondered not for the first time if she'd made a terrible mistake. 6 months ago, she'd been living in Boston, working 60-hour weeks as a social worker, barely sleeping, surviving on coffee, and the belief that she was making a difference. Then came the incident with the Moreno case, a family she'd fought so hard to keep together, only to have everything fall apart in the worst possible way. The review board had cleared her of wrongdoing, but Emma couldn't clear herself. So when her aunt's letter arrived, offering her the job as lighthouse keeper on Gulls Point Island off the coast of Maine, Emma had packed her life into boxes and run. That's what it felt like, anyway. Running. The lighthouse beams swept across the darkening water, steady and sure. Everything Emma wasn't. She'd spent the last 3 months learning the rhythms of the light, the weather patterns, the supply boat schedule, the 37 year-round residents of the island who regarded her with polite curiosity. It was quiet work, solitary work, and most days that felt like exactly what she needed. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Emma wasn't expecting anyone, especially not in this weather. The ferry had stopped running an hour ago, and most sensible people were already battened down for the night. She crossed the small living room, her wool socks silent on the worn floorboards, and opened the door. A man stood on her porch, drenched to the bone, dark hair plastered to his forehead. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a leather jacket that looked expensive, even soaked with rain. But it was his eyes that caught her grey as the storm behind him, and haunted in a way she recognized. "I need help," he said, and his voice was rough, urgent. "Please." Emma's instincts, honed by years of crisis intervention, kicked in immediately. She assessed him quickly, no visible weapons, no signs of intoxication, but definitely in distress. Behind him, she could just make out a small motorboat tied to the dock, rocking violently in the swells. "Come in," she said, stepping back. "You'll freeze out there." He hesitated for just a moment, as if weighing whether to trust her, then stepped inside. Water pooled on her floor immediately. Emma closed the door against the wind and turned to face him. "Wait here," she said. "I'll get towels." She hurried to the bathroom, grabbed the stack of clean towels from the shelf, and returned to find him still standing exactly where she'd left him, dripping and shivering slightly. Up close, she could see he was probably in his mid-30s, with a scar along his left jawline and shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Here," she said, handing him the towels. "What kind of help do you need?" He took the towels but didn't immediately start drying off. Instead, he met her eyes with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "My daughter," he said. "She's in the boat. She's sick fever, cough, having trouble breathing. I need to get her to a doctor, but I can't make it to the mainland in this storm." Emma's training took over completely. "How old is she?" 7. "Her name is Riley." "Bring her in now," Emma said, already moving toward the door. "I'll help you." They ran together through the rain, down the wooden steps to the dock. The boat lurched sickeningly with each wave, and Emma's heart clenched when she saw the small figure bundled in blankets in the stern. The man he still hadn't told her his name jumped down into the boat with practiced ease and carefully lifted the child into his arms. Emma got her first look at Riley as they rushed back to the cottage, a small, pale face with fever-bright eyes, dark curls damp with sweat and rain. The child's breathing was indeed labored, each breath a wheeze that made Emma's chest tighten in sympathy. Inside, Emma directed the man to lay Riley on the couch. She grabbed more blankets from the closet and her first aid kit from under the sink. "How long has she been like this?" Emma asked, kneeling beside the couch and pressing her hand gently to Riley's forehead. The fever was high, too high. "Started yesterday morning," the man said, his voice tight with worry. "Got worse through the night. I was trying to get her to Portland, but the storm came up faster than I expected." Emma found her thermometer and took Riley's temperature, 103.8 degrees. She listened to the child's lungs with her stethoscope, hearing the crackle that suggested fluid. Pneumonia, most likely. "I'm not a doctor," Emma said, looking up at him, "but I have some medical training from my previous work. This looks like it could be pneumonia. She needs antibiotics. Do you have any?" His voice was desperate now. "The island has a small clinic, but Dr. Morrison is on the mainland for the weekend. However," Emma stood, thinking quickly, "he leaves emergency supplies. I have a key. Can we get there?" Emma looked at the window, at the storm raging outside. The clinic was only half a mile away, but in this weather, it might as well be 10. Still, looking at Riley's labored breathing, she knew they didn't have a choice. "We'll take my truck," she said. "You stay here with her. Keep her warm. I'll be back as fast as I can." "No," he said immediately. "I'm coming with you. Riley needs someone with her, and you might need help at the clinic," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "We'll be quick. She'll be okay for 10 minutes. Emma wanted to argue, but she saw the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, the need to do something, anything, to help his daughter. She understood that feeling all too well. "Okay," she said, "but we go now." They took 30 seconds to bundle Riley more securely, and Emma left a battery-powered lantern beside the couch so the child wouldn't wake in darkness. Then they were out the door again, fighting against wind that tried to push them off the path. Emma's truck, a battered Ford that had belonged to the previous keeper, sat in the small garage beside the cottage. They climbed in, and Emma started the engine, grateful when it roared to life on the first try. The road to the clinic was barely visible through the rain-streaked windshield. Emma drove slowly, hands tight on the wheel, hyper-aware of the man sitting beside her. He smelled like salt water and leather, and there was a tension radiating from him that filled the small space. "I'm Emma," she said, needing to break the silence. "Emma Castellano, I'm the Lighthouse keeper." "Jack," he said after a pause. "Jack Mercer." "Where were you coming from, Jack?" Another pause, longer this time. "South," he said finally. "We've been traveling." It wasn't really an answer, and Emma's instincts prickled. In her old life, she'd learned to recognize when people were hiding something, running from something. Jack Mercer was definitely hiding something. But right now, his daughter needed help, and that was all that mattered. The clinic appeared through the rain, a small building with white clapboard siding and a red cross above the door. Emma parked as close as she could and grabbed the keys from her pocket. They ran for the door together, and Emma fumbled with the lock, her fingers numb with cold. Inside, the clinic was dark and quiet. Emma flipped on the lights and headed straight for the medicine cabinet. It was locked as expected, but Dr. Morrison had given her the combination for emergencies. Jack stood close behind her, close enough that she could feel his presence like heat. "What are you looking for?" "Amoxicillin, probably," Emma said, scanning the neatly labeled shelves. "Or azithromycin, if she's allergic to penicillin." "Is she?" "No allergies," Jack said. Emma found what she needed: liquid amoxicillin, children's ibuprofen, and some cough medicine with an expectorant. She also grabbed an inhaler in case Riley's breathing got worse. As she gathered supplies, she was acutely aware of Jack watching her every move, his grey eyes tracking her hands. "You really know what you're doing," he said. And there was something in his voice, surprise, maybe, or relief. "I was a social worker," Emma said, putting everything into a canvas bag. "Mostly with families in crisis. You learn to handle medical emergencies." "Was?" Emma closed the cabinet and locked it again. "Was," she confirmed, not offering more. She had her secrets too. They drove back through the storm, and Emma felt some of the tension ease now that she had what Riley needed. But new questions crowded her mind. Who was Jack Mercer? Why was he traveling with his daughter in a small boat in October when the Atlantic was notoriously dangerous? And why did he seem so reluctant to share even basic information about where they'd come from? Back at the cottage, Riley was exactly where they'd left her, curled under the blankets, her small chest rising and falling with effort. Jack went to her immediately, brushing the damp curls back from her forehead with a tenderness that made Emma's heart ache. "Hey, Riley Bear," he murmured. "Daddy's back. We've got medicine for you." Riley's eyes fluttered open. Hazel eyes, Emma noticed, different from her father's grey. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Right here, sweetheart." Emma knelt beside them with the medicine. "Riley, my name is Emma. I'm going to help you feel better, okay? But I need you to take this medicine for me. Can you do that?" Riley looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. Then the little girl nodded too. Emma measured out the antibiotic carefully, along with ibuprofen to bring down the fever. Riley grimaced at the taste but swallowed it all, her trust both touching and heartbreaking. "Good girl," Jack said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "You're so brave." "You should both stay here tonight," Emma said, making the decision even as she spoke. "The storm isn't going to let up until morning, and Riley shouldn't be moved. I have a spare bedroom upstairs." Jack looked up at her, and something passed between them. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper, more complicated. Emma felt it like a physical pull, this connection to a man she'd met less than an hour ago. "Thank you," he said simply. "We'll leave first thing in the morning." But Emma saw the tension still coiled in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting to the windows, as if expecting something or someone to appear out of the storm. Whatever Jack Mercer was running from, he hadn't left it behind. She helped him carry Riley upstairs to the spare room, a cozy space with sloped ceilings and a view of the sea. They tucked the little girl into the double bed, piling on extra blankets. Already, Riley's breathing seemed a little easier, though it would take time for the antibiotics to really take effect. "You can sleep in here with her," Emma said. "There's plenty of room. I'll be just down the hall if you need anything." Jack nodded, but made no move to lie down. Instead, he stood at the window, looking out at the dark water, the lighthouse beam sweeping across the waves in its eternal pattern. "Emma," he said quietly, not turning around. "Have you lived here long?" 3 months, she said. "Why? Do you ever get visitors? People from the mainland?" "Sometimes," Emma said, her pulse quickening slightly. "Why do you ask?" He was silent for a long moment, and Emma watched the rigid line of his back, the way his hands curled into fists at his sides. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "If anyone comes asking about us, about a man and a little girl, tell them you never saw us. Please." Emma's social worker instincts flared to life, along with a dozen alarm bells. Was Riley in danger? Was Jack? Or was Jack himself the danger? She thought of the way he'd held Riley so gently, the raw fear in his voice when he'd asked for help, the tender way he'd called her Riley Bear. Whatever else Jack Mercer might be, he loved his daughter fiercely. "Jack," she said carefully, "if you're in some kind of trouble—" "I can't tell you," he interrupted, finally turning to face her. His grey eyes were shadowed with pain. "I want to, but I can't. Not yet. Just please. If anyone asks, you never saw us." Emma knew she should press, should demand answers, should maybe even call the mainland and report this strange man and his sick daughter. But something in his eyes stopped her, a desperation that she recognized because she'd felt it herself. That night 6 months ago when her world had fallen apart. "Okay," she heard herself say. "I won't say anything." The relief that washed over his face was palpable. "Thank you," he said again, and this time the words carried weight. Emma left him there, standing guard over his sleeping daughter, and went back downstairs. She cleaned up the puddles of water, made a pot of tea she didn't drink, and tried not to think about the promise she'd just made. Outside, the storm raged on, and the lighthouse beam continued its steady rotation, a warning and a welcome all at once. Emma stood at the window and watched the light cut through the darkness, and felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't felt in months' purpose. Jack Mercer and his daughter had washed up on her shore like shipwreck survivors, and every instinct Emma had told her they were in trouble. Deep trouble. She should turn them away, protect herself, maintain the careful distance she'd cultivated since coming to the island. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was Riley's fever-bright hazel eyes and the desperate love in Jack's face, and she knew she couldn't turn them away. Whatever storm they were running from, Emma was already caught in it now. Emma woke to silence. The storm had passed sometime in the early hours, leaving behind that peculiar stillness that always followed violent weather. Grey dawn light filtered through her bedroom curtains, and for a moment, Emma wondered if she'd dreamed the whole thing: the knock at the door, the desperate father, the sick child. Then she heard footsteps overhead, quiet and careful, and knew it had all been real. She dressed quickly in jeans and a thick sweater, ran her fingers through her dark hair, and headed downstairs to make coffee. The cottage felt different with other people in it, warmer somehow, more alive, though Emma wasn't sure if that feeling brought her comfort or unease. She was pulling eggs from the refrigerator when Jack appeared in the kitchen doorway. He'd changed out of his wet clothes into a t-shirt and jeans from his bag, and his dark hair was still damp from a shower. In the morning light, Emma could see him more clearly: the sharp angles of his face, the breadth of his shoulders, the weariness that seemed etched into his very bones. "How is she?" Emma asked. "Fever broke around 3, Jack said, and his relief was audible. "She's sleeping now, really sleeping, not that fitful, half-conscious state. The medicine worked." "That's good," Emma said, feeling her own tension ease slightly. "She'll need to finish the full course of antibiotics, though. 10 days. Jack nodded, but something flickered across his face: worry. Or maybe calculation. "Of course." Emma poured 2 mugs of coffee, black and strong, and handed one to Jack. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and Emma felt a jolt of awareness that caught her off guard. She stepped back quickly, focusing on the eggs. "You mentioned leaving this morning," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "But Riley really shouldn't travel yet. She needs at least a day or 2 to recover." Jack moved to the window, looking out at the calm sea, so different from last night's fury. His jaw tightened. "We can't stay." "Why not?" He didn't answer, just took a long drink of coffee, his profile hard against the pale morning light. Emma cracked eggs into a bowl, whisked them perhaps more vigorously than necessary. "Look, Jack, I said I wouldn't tell anyone you were here, and I meant it. But if you're putting Riley at risk by moving her too soon—" "I'm trying to keep her safe," Jack said, his voice suddenly sharp. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Everything I'm doing is to keep her safe." Safe from what? For a moment, Emma thought he might actually tell her. She saw the struggle play out across his features, the need to confide warring with the need to protect. Then, his expression closed off again, walls slamming back into place. "It's better if you don't know," he said quietly. Emma poured the eggs into a heated pan, the sizzle filling the silence between them. She'd heard variations of that line 100 times in her old job, from parents who were hiding abuse, from victims who were protecting their abusers, from people who thought secrets kept them safer than truth ever could. But she'd also heard it from people who were genuinely trying to protect others, who carried burdens they didn't want to share. The question was, which category did Jack Mercer fall into? "At least stay until Riley's strong enough to travel safely," Emma said finally. "A day, maybe 2. No one comes out here much, especially this time of year. You'd be safe." Jack was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. Then he nodded slowly. "One day," he said. "If she's better by tomorrow, we leave." It wasn't much, but Emma would take it. She divided the scrambled eggs onto 2 plates, added toast, and they ate in silence, the morning sun gradually burning away the grey. Around 9, Riley appeared at the bottom of the stairs, wrapped in a blanket like a small ghost. Her curls were tangled, her face still pale, but her hazel eyes were clearer than they'd been last night. "Daddy?" she said, her voice hoarse but stronger. Jack was on his feet instantly, crossing the room to scoop her up. "Hey, Riley Bear, how are you feeling?" "My throat hurts," Riley said, "and I'm hungry." Emma felt a smile tug at her lips. Appetite was a good sign. "How about some toast and juice?" she offered. Riley looked at her with cautious curiosity. "Who are you?" "This is Emma," Jack said gently. "She helped you last night when you were sick. She's letting us stay in her house." "Your house is pretty," Riley said to Emma, with the straightforward honesty of children. "It smells like the ocean." "That's because we're right next to it," Emma said, warming to the little girl immediately. "Would you like to see?" Riley nodded enthusiastically, then coughed a deep, rattling cough that made Jack wince. Emma fetched the cough medicine and another dose of antibiotic, then settled Riley on the couch with toast and apple juice, while Jack hovered anxiously nearby. "I need to check the lighthouse," Emma said, pulling on her jacket. "Make yourselves at home. There are books on the shelf, and the TV gets about 3 channels on a good day." "Emma," Jack said, catching her arm as she headed for the door. His touch was warm, his grip firm but gentle. "Thank you for everything." Up close, Emma could see flecks of blue in his grey eyes, could count the lines of exhaustion around his mouth. There was something magnetic about him, something that drew her in, even as her better judgment warned her away. "You're welcome," she said, and gently pulled free. Outside, the air was crisp and salt-sharp, the sky swept clean by the storm. Emma climbed the spiral stairs inside the lighthouse tower, her footsteps echoing in the confined space. At the top, she checked the light mechanism, made sure everything was functioning properly, then stood at the windows and looked out at the vast expanse of ocean. Somewhere out there, Jack and Riley had come from. Somewhere out there, something or someone was looking for them. Emma had promised not to ask questions, had promised not to tell anyone they were here. But standing in the lighthouse, surrounded by the tools meant to guide lost souls safely to shore, she couldn't help but wonder what she'd gotten herself into. When she returned to the cottage an hour later, she found Riley asleep again on the couch and Jack in the kitchen, washing the breakfast dishes. It was such a domestic scene, so utterly normal, that it made Emma's chest ache. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I want to," Jack replied without turning around. "You've done so much for us. It's the least I can do." Emma grabbed a dish towel and started drying the plates he'd washed. They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, falling into an easy rhythm that felt startlingly natural. "How long have you been running?" Emma asked quietly. Jack's hands stilled in the soapy water. "What makes you think we're running?" "I used to work with families in crisis," Emma said. "I know what running looks like. The way you keep watching the windows, the way you tense up at every sound, the fact that you're traveling with a 7-year-old in a boat in October. You're running from something." Jack was quiet for so long that Emma thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, softly, he said, 3 months. We've been running for 3 months. 3 months. The same amount of time Emma had been on the island, hiding from her own demons. "From who?" "From Riley's mother," Jack said, and the pain in his voice was raw. "My ex-wife, Vanessa." Emma waited, sensing there was more. Jack pulled his hands from the water, dried them on a towel, his movements slow and deliberate. "Vanessa comes from money. Real money, the kind that buys influence, lawyers, judges. When we divorced 2 years ago, she got primary custody because I was deployed overseas. I'm ex-military," he explained. "Navy." That explained the way he moved. Emma thought the controlled grace, the constant awareness. "When I got back stateside, I started noticing things," Jack continued. "Riley was different, jumpy, afraid. She had bruises she couldn't explain. I tried to file for custody, but Vanessa's lawyers buried me. They made me look like an unstable veteran making false accusations." Emma's stomach clenched. She knew this story, had lived versions of it in her work. The system that was supposed to protect children sometimes failed them in devastating ways. "Then one night, Riley called me," Jack said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "She was crying, hysterical. Vanessa's boyfriend, some hedge fund asshole named Marcus, had hurt her. Bad. I went to get her and I saw what he'd done. The bruises, the fear in her eyes. I couldn't leave her there. I couldn't." "So you took her?" Emma said softly. "So I took her," Jack confirmed. "And technically, that makes me a kidnapper. Vanessa has the full weight of the legal system behind her, and a private investigator looking for us. If they find us, I go to jail, and Riley goes back to her mother, back to Marcus." Emma felt the weight of his confession settle over her like a physical thing. This wasn't just trouble, this was serious, life-altering trouble. And by helping them, by promising to keep their secret, she'd made herself complicit. She should be angry, should feel manipulated. Instead, she felt a fierce protectiveness rise up in her chest. "Did you report what you saw?" she asked. "To CPS? To the police?" "Of course I did," Jack said, frustration bleeding through. "Multiple times. But Vanessa's lawyers made it all go away. They claimed I was coaching Riley, that I was trying to alienate her from her mother. The system failed her, Emma. So I did the only thing I could." Emma looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man pushed past his breaking point, a father who'd chosen his daughter over everything else. She'd seen too many parents who didn't make that choice, who let the system grind their children down rather than fight. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. Jack met her eyes, and the vulnerability in his expression stole her breath. "Because you deserve to know what you're risking by helping us. And because..." He paused, something shifting in his gaze. "Because I trust you. I don't know why, but I do." The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. Emma knew she should step back, maintain professional distance the way she'd been trained. But standing in her kitchen with this broken, beautiful man who was trying so hard to save his daughter, all her training felt distant and irrelevant. "What's your plan?" she asked finally. "Keep moving," Jack said. "Head north into Canada, maybe. Find somewhere remote where we can disappear for a while. I have some money saved, enough to last us a few months if we're careful." "And then what?" "I don't know," he admitted, and the hopelessness in his voice made Emma's heart clench. "I'm making this up as I go. All I know is I can't let them take her back. I won't." Emma thought of the Moreno case, of the family she'd tried so hard to save and couldn't. She'd followed all the rules, worked within the system, and it hadn't been enough. Sometimes the rules weren't enough. Sometimes you had to break them to do what was right. "Stay," she heard herself say. Jack looked at her sharply. "What?" "Stay here," Emma said, the decision crystallizing even as she spoke. "For a few days at least. Let Riley recover properly. The island is small, isolated. No one's going to look for you here." "Emma, we can't ask you to..." "You're not asking," Emma interrupted. "I'm offering. Riley needs time to heal, and frankly, so do you. When's the last time you slept more than a few hours? When's the last time you weren't looking over your shoulder?" Jack's expression was a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "Why would you do this? You don't know us." "No," Emma agreed. "But I know what it's like to be running from something. And I know what it's like when the system fails the people it's supposed to protect." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I worked with a family once, did everything by the book, followed every protocol. The mother was trying so hard, making real progress. But her ex was connected, had friends in the system. He manipulated things and I couldn't stop it. She lost her kids." Emma's throat tightened with the memory. The system is supposed to protect children, but sometimes it protects the wrong people. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. Understanding dawned in Jack's eyes. "That's why you left. That's why you came here." "I couldn't save them," Emma said quietly. "But maybe I can help you save Riley." The kitchen was silent except for the soft sound of Riley's breathing from the living room. Jack looked at Emma like he was seeing her for the first time, like she was something precious and unexpected. 3 days, he said finally. "We'll stay 3 days, until Riley's stronger. Then we have to move on. The longer we stay in one place, the more dangerous it gets." 3 days. It wasn't much, but it was something. Emma nodded. 3 days. Jack stepped closer, close enough that Emma could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the gold ring he wore on a chain around his neck. Probably his dog tags, she thought. "Emma," he said softly, "if this goes wrong, if they find us here..." "They won't," Emma said, with more confidence than she felt. "This island is off every map that matters. You're safe here." She wanted to believe that. Standing in her kitchen with Jack Mercer's grey eyes searching hers, Emma wanted desperately to believe that she could give them this 3 days of safety, 3 days of peace, 3 days to be something other than hunted. But as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that by opening her door to Jack and Riley, she'd set something in motion that she couldn't control. 3 days, she told herself. What could possibly happen in 3 days? The first day passed in a kind of domestic tranquility that Emma hadn't experienced in years. Riley slept for most of the morning, her small body finally able to rest now that the antibiotics were working. Jack stayed close to her, reading a battered paperback he'd pulled from his bag, but frequently glancing up to check on his daughter. Emma went about her usual tasks, checking weather reports, maintaining the lighthouse equipment, updating her log, but found herself constantly aware of their presence. Around noon, Riley woke hungry, and Emma made grilled cheese sandwiches while Jack coaxed his daughter to take her medicine. They ate together at the small kitchen table, and Riley chattered between bites about the boat trip, about the storm, about the dream she'd had where she could fly over the ocean like a seagull. "Can I see the lighthouse?" Riley asked, her hazel eyes bright with interest. "Daddy said it's really tall." "Maybe tomorrow," Jack said gently. "You need to rest today." Riley's face fell, and Emma felt an unexpected tug of sympathy. "How about I tell you about the lighthouse instead?" she offered. "It's been here for almost 100 years, and it has some pretty interesting stories." Riley perked up immediately. "Stories?" So Emma told her about the lighthouse keeper in the 1940s who'd saved 6 sailors from a shipwreck, about the time a hurricane nearly destroyed the tower, but the light kept burning, about the family of seals that lived on the rocks below and would sun themselves every afternoon when the weather was nice. Riley listened with rapt attention, and Jack watched Emma with something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. When Emma finished, Riley declared that she wanted to be a lighthouse keeper when she grew up, which made both adults smile. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Riley asked Emma seriously. "I thought I already was grown up," Emma said, teasing gently. Riley giggled, a sound like wind chimes that made Emma's heart squeeze. "But what did you want to be when you were my age?" Emma thought back to 7-year-old Emma, before her parents' divorce, before she learned that families could break apart like ships on rocks. "I wanted to help people," she said simply, "and I guess I still do." "You helped us," Riley said matter-of-factly. "You made me feel better." "I'm glad," Emma said, and meant it more than she could express. That afternoon, while Riley napped again, Emma and Jack found themselves on the cottage's small back porch, drinking coffee and watching the sea. The water was calm now, almost glass-like, as if apologizing for the violence of the night before. "She likes you," Jack said, breaking the comfortable silence. "She's easy to like," Emma replied. "She's a great kid." "She is," Jack agreed, pride evident in his voice. "Smart, funny, resilient. After everything she's been through." His voice caught slightly, and he cleared his throat. "She's stronger than I am." Emma studied his profile, the strong jaw, the slight hook in his nose that suggested it had been broken at least once, the way his hands curled around his mug, like he needed something to anchor him. "You're stronger than you think," she said quietly. "What you're doing, protecting her, sacrificing everything that takes incredible strength." Jack shook his head. "It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like desperation, like I'm barely holding it together." "Strength and desperation aren't mutually exclusive," Emma said. "Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is admit you're scared." He turned to look at her then, really look at her, and Emma felt the intensity of his gaze like a physical touch. "Are you scared, Emma? Of what you're risking by helping us?" "Yes," she admitted. "But I'm more scared of what happens if I don't help." Jack set down his mug and shifted closer, close enough that their shoulders were almost touching. "Why did you really leave your job?" he asked softly. "You said the system failed that family, but there's more to it, isn't there?" Emma felt her chest tighten. She'd shared bits and pieces of the Moreno case with colleagues, with the review board, but she'd never told anyone the whole truth, the weight of it, the way it had broken something fundamental inside her. But sitting here with Jack, this man who trusted her with his own devastating truth, she found the words coming easier than she'd expected. "Maria Moreno," Emma began, "was trying so hard to turn her life around. She'd been in an abusive relationship, struggled with addiction, lost custody of her 2 kids. But she got clean, got a job, got an apartment. She did everything we asked of her. Everything." Emma stared out at the water, seeing not the ocean, but Maria's face, young, hopeful, desperate to get her children back. I advocated for her reunion with her kids, wrote reports, testified in court, went to bat for her. But her ex, the kid's father, he was connected. His uncle was a judge. His cousin worked in the DA's office. They made sure the case went to a judge who was sympathetic to him. They denied the reunion, Jack said. And it wasn't a question. They denied it, Emma confirmed. Said Maria needed more time, more proof of stability, despite all evidence showing she was ready. 2 weeks later, Emma's voice cracked, and she had to force the words out. She took her own life, left a note saying she couldn't fight anymore, that the system had beaten her. Jack reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. He didn't say anything, didn't offer empty platitudes, just held her hand and let her feel the weight of the grief she'd been carrying alone for 6 months. The review board said I'd done everything right, Emma continued, her voice steadier now. That there was nothing more I could have done within the system. But that was the problem, wasn't it? I stayed within the system, followed the rules, and Maria died. Her kids are still with their father, who's just as manipulative and controlling as Maria said he was. And I couldn't save any of them. So you came here, Jack said softly. So, I came here, Emma echoed. Thought if I couldn't save anyone, maybe I should stop trying. Keep a lighthouse, warn ships away from rocks, live a simple life where the only lives in my hands were my own. Jack squeezed her hand gently. And then we showed up on your doorstep. And then you showed up on my doorstep, Emma agreed, finally meeting his eyes. And I realized I can't stop trying. It's not in me to turn away when someone needs help, even if it costs you. Even then, Emma said. They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped, sharing the weight of their respective failures and fears. The sun was starting its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Emma, Jack said, his voice low and rough. What you did for Maria, advocating for her, believing in her, that mattered. The system failed her, but you didn't. You gave her something to fight for, even if it wasn't enough in the end. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. Thank you, she whispered. And for what it's worth, Jack continued, I think you're saving us, Riley and me, not just by giving us shelter, but by, he paused, seeming to search for the right words, by reminding us what it feels like to be safe, to not be alone. The air between them felt electric, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Emma was acutely aware of how close Jack was, of the way his thumb was unconsciously stroking the back of her hand, of the heat in his grey eyes that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with something far more complicated. Jack, she started, but whatever she was going to say was interrupted by Riley calling from inside the cottage. Daddy! Emma! They pulled apart, and Emma felt the loss of his touch like a physical ache. Jack stood quickly, all business again, the moment broken. Coming, Riley Bear, he called, then glanced back at Emma. Thank you, he said again, and the words carried layers of meaning. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice, and watched him disappear inside. She stayed on the porch for a few more minutes, trying to steady her racing heart, trying to understand what was happening to her. She'd known Jack Mercer for less than 24 hours, but already he'd gotten under her skin in a way no one had in years. It was dangerous. She knew getting attached to someone who would be gone in 2 days, someone who was running from the law, someone whose very presence put her at risk. But danger had never felt quite like this before, like coming home. The second day began with thick fog rolling in from the sea, wrapping the island in grey silence. Emma woke early, as was her habit, and found Jack already in the kitchen, making coffee with the ease of someone who'd grown comfortable in her space. Morning, he said, handing her a mug. Riley's still asleep, slept through the whole night. That's good, Emma said, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. Means the antibiotics are really working. They stood together at the kitchen window, watching the fog shift and swirl. The lighthouse beam was barely visible, a diffuse glow in the grey. We should move the boat, Jack said suddenly. Hide it better, if anyone comes looking. There's a cove on the north side of the island, Emma said. It's hidden from the main channel, and the rocks make, It's hard to spot from the water. We could move it there. Jack looked at her with something like admiration. You've really thought this through. I spent my whole career thinking 3 steps ahead, Emma said. Old habits. They waited until Riley woke, made sure she ate breakfast and took her medicine, then left her settled on the couch with a stack of books Emma had dug out of her closet, old children's classics that had belonged to her aunt. The fog was even thicker now, muffling sound and reducing visibility to mere feet. Emma led Jack down to the dock where his boat was tied, then climbed in while he untied the lines. The motor started with a cough, and they began the slow journey around the island's perimeter. In the fog, the world felt reduced to just the 2 of them, the boat, the water, the grey silence pressing in from all sides. Jack navigated carefully, his military training evident in the way he read the water, adjusted for currents, kept them clear of rocks. You're good at this, Emma observed. Navy SEAL, Jack said, then seemed to catch himself. Was. Past life. Emma absorbed this information, pieces of Jack's puzzle clicking into place. How long were you in? 12 years, Jack said. Joined right out of high school. Met Vanessa during my last deployment. She was doing some kind of charity photo shoot on the base. Should have known better than to fall for someone who treated our lives like a photo op. But I was young and stupid. You weren't stupid, Emma said. You fell in love. Same thing sometimes, Jack said with a bitter smile. We got married fast, had Riley even faster. I thought we were building something, you know? A family. But Vanessa, she wanted the image of a military family, not the reality. When I was deployed, she was the devoted wife. When I came home, I was in the way of her life. Emma could hear the pain beneath his words, the betrayal that still cut deep. When did you realize something was wrong? With Riley? Jack's hands tightened on the boat's wheel. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I'd gotten out of the Navy, was trying to build a normal life, find a regular job. I had Riley every other weekend, and she'd always been this bright, bubbly kid. But suddenly she was withdrawn, jumpy, nightmares. I asked her what was wrong, but she wouldn't talk. The cove came into view through the fog, a narrow inlet surrounded by tall rocks that formed a natural barrier. Jack guided the boat inside expertly, then cut the engine. Then I noticed the bruises, he continued, his voice flat with controlled rage. On her arms, her legs. She said she fell, that she was clumsy. But I've seen enough injuries to know the difference between accident and intent. When I confronted Vanessa, she denied everything, said I was paranoid, that I had PTSD and was seeing things that weren't there. They worked together to secure the boat, tying it to a rock outcropping where it would be invisible from the water. Emma covered it with a tarp Jack had in his gear, camouflaging it further. But you knew what you saw, Emma said. I knew, Jack confirmed, so I started documenting everything, taking photos, writing down what Riley said, building a case, filed for emergency custody. That's when Vanessa's lawyers came out in force. Suddenly I was the unstable veteran, the bitter ex-husband making false accusations. They dug up every difficult moment from my deployments, twisted it to make me look dangerous. They started the walk back to the cottage, following the narrow path that circled the island. The fog was beginning to lift slightly, revealing glimpses of grey sky above. What about Marcus? Emma asked. When did he come into the picture? Jack's expression darkened. About a year ago. Vanessa started dating him, and things got worse for Riley almost immediately. Marcus Caldwell, hedge fund manager, comes from old money, thinks he can buy or bully his way out of anything. And so far, he's been right. That's who you're really running from, Emma said. Not just Vanessa, but him. He's dangerous, Jack said flatly. In ways Vanessa isn't. She's negligent, selfish. But Marcus, he's calculating. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he enjoys it. That night I took Riley. I saw what he'd done to her. Grabbed her hard enough to leave finger marks on her arm because she'd spilled juice on his precious Italian leather couch. And when Riley cried, Jack's voice broke, and he stopped walking, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Emma reached out and touched his arm, grounding him. "You got her out," she said firmly. "That's what matters. You protected her." Jack looked at her, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole her breath. "But for how long? We can't run forever, Emma. Eventually, we'll run out of money, out of places to hide. And when they find us, because they will find us, I go to prison, and Riley goes back to them. Then we make sure they don't find you," Emma said, surprised by the fierceness in her own voice. "Or we find another way." "What other way?" Emma didn't have an answer, not yet. But standing there in the lifting fog with Jack Mercer looking at her like she might have the solution to the impossible, she felt something shift inside her, a determination she hadn't felt since before Maria Moreno's death. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I used to be pretty good at navigating impossible systems. Maybe I still am." Jack studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, tentatively, he reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate, tender, and it made Emma's heart race. "You're remarkable," he said softly. "Do you know that?" Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm just trying to help." "No," Jack said, his hand lingering near her face. "You're doing more than that. You're giving us hope." I'd forgotten what that felt like. The moment stretched between them, charged and fragile. Emma found herself leaning closer, drawn by something she couldn't name and wasn't sure she wanted to resist. Jack's eyes dropped to her lips, and she saw him war with himself, wanting to close the distance, knowing he shouldn't. Then, from somewhere in the direction of the cottage, they heard Riley's voice calling for her father. The spell broke, and they stepped apart, both slightly breathless. "We should get back," Emma said, her voice not quite steady. Jack nodded, but before they started walking again, he caught her hand briefly. "Emma," he said, "thank you for everything." She squeezed his hand once, then let go. "Come on," she said. "Riley's probably ready to see that lighthouse." They found Riley on the porch, wrapped in a blanket and looking much healthier than she had the day before. Her color was better, her eyes brighter, and her cough had eased considerably. "Can I see the lighthouse now?" she asked hopefully. "Please." Jack looked at Emma, who nodded. "I think you're strong enough for that adventure," Emma said. Riley's face lit up, and Emma felt a rush of affection for this brave little girl who'd been through so much. They bundled Riley in warm clothes, and Emma led them across the short stretch of ground to the lighthouse tower. Inside, the spiral staircase wound upward into shadow. "It's 142 steps to the top," Emma said to Riley. "Think you can make it?" "Yes," Riley said with determination, and they began to climb. Jack stayed close behind his daughter, ready to catch her if she stumbled, and Emma led the way, counting steps and telling stories about the lighthouse as they ascended. By the time they reached the top, Riley was breathing hard but beaming with pride. "I did it," she exclaimed. "You did," Emma agreed, pushing open the door to the lantern room. "And here's your reward." The fog had lifted enough to reveal the stunning view ocean stretching in every direction, the mainland barely visible in the distance, seabirds wheeling and diving in the crisp air. Riley pressed her face to the glass, her breath fogging the windows. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. "I can see forever." Emma showed her the light mechanism, explained how it rotated, how the Fresnel lens magnified the beam so ships could see it from 20 miles away. Riley listened with rapt attention, asking questions that showed a sharp intelligence, and Emma found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. Jack stood slightly apart, watching his daughter's joy with an expression that made Emma's throat tight. This was what safety looked like. She realized not just the absence of danger, but the presence of peace, the ability to simply be, to enjoy a moment without fear. "Thank you," Jack said quietly, moving to stand beside Emma while Riley explored the lantern room. "For giving her this. She deserves moments like this," Emma said. "Every child does." They stood together in companionable silence, and Emma felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing between them, the attraction neither of them could deny, the impossibility of their situation, the knowledge that tomorrow Jack and Riley would have to leave, and Emma might never see them again. "Emma," Jack said, his voice low enough that Riley wouldn't hear, "when this is over, If I can ever fix this, don't. Emma interrupted gently. Don't make promises about a future we can't see. But I want to, Jack said, turning to face her fully. I want to be able to promise you something, Emma. I want... He stopped, frustration evident in every line of his body. I have no right to want anything from you. I'm a fugitive with a kid and no future. Daddy, look, Riley called, pointing out the window at a pod of dolphins swimming past. Dolphins! The moment shattered, and Jack went to his daughter, leaving Emma standing alone with her heart pounding and her mind racing. What was she doing? Falling for a man she barely knew, getting attached to a child she couldn't keep, putting everything at risk for people who would be gone in less than 24 hours. But watching Jack and Riley together, seeing the love and trust between them, Emma knew she was already too far gone to turn back. Whatever happened next, she was in this completely, irrevocably in this. That evening, Emma made dinner pasta with marinara sauce, garlic bread, salad from the vegetables she'd bought from Mrs. Chen at the island's general store. They ate together at the kitchen table, and Riley chatted about the lighthouse, about the dolphins, about how she felt so much better now. After dinner, Riley helped Emma with the dishes, while Jack went upstairs to pack their things. The little girl was quieter now, more subdued, and Emma wondered if she sensed that their time here was ending. Emma? Riley said as she dried a plate with careful concentration. Do you think we'll ever come back here? Emma's chest tightened. Would you like to? Yes, Riley said immediately. I like it here. It's quiet and nobody yells and you're nice. And Daddy smiles more here. Emma blinked back unexpected tears. Your daddy loves you very much, she said. Everything he's doing is to keep you safe. I know, Riley said, but it makes me sad that he's always worried. Here, he's not so worried. Out of the mouths of babes, Emma thought. Riley had put her finger exactly on what Emma had been feeling, that these 3 days had given Jack something precious, something beyond just physical safety. They'd given him permission to breathe. Riley, Emma said carefully, wherever you and your daddy go next, I want you to remember that you're brave and strong, and that what happened to you, what Marcus did, that wasn't your fault. Do you understand? Riley nodded slowly, her hazel eyes serious beyond her years. Daddy says that too. Because it's true, Emma said firmly. And one day, when you're safe, you're going to have a wonderful life. I know it. Riley surprised her by wrapping her small arms around Emma's waist in a fierce hug. I wish you could come with us, she whispered. Emma hugged her back, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and innocence. Me too, sweetheart, she said. Me too. Later that night, after Riley had gone to bed, Emma and Jack found themselves on the porch again, drawn by unspoken agreement to this space that had become theirs. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like scattered diamonds. We're leaving at first light, Jack said, not looking at her. Riley's strong enough, and we've stayed too long already. Emma had known this was coming, but hearing the words still felt like a blow. Where will you go? North, Jack said vaguely. It's better if you don't know specifics. To protect me, Emma said. To protect you, Jack confirmed. If anyone comes asking, I never saw you, Emma finished. I know. They were quiet for a moment, the only sound the distant crash of waves against rocks. Then Jack turned to face her, and the expression on his face made Emma's breath catch. Emma, he said, I need you to know these 3 days, they've meant everything. You've given us more than shelter. You've given us a glimpse of what life could be like if we weren't running, if things were different. Jack, Emma started, but he shook his head. Let me finish, he said. Please. I know I have no right to say this, but I need to say it anyway. These 3 days with you, I haven't felt this way about anyone since before my marriage fell apart. Hell, maybe not even then. You're smart and kind and brave, and the way you've taken care of Riley, the way you've trusted us when you had every reason not to. His voice cracked slightly. I'm falling for you, Emma, and I hate that I can't do anything about it. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. You think I'm not feeling the same thing, she said, her voice rough with emotion. You think it's been easy for me, knowing you're leaving, knowing I might never see you again. I've been hiding here for 6 months, convinced I couldn't help anyone, that I was better off alone. And then you showed up, and suddenly I remember why I became a social worker in the first place. Because helping people, connecting with people, that's what makes life worth living." Jack closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to cup her face. "Emma," he breathed, and then he was kissing her, and Emma was kissing him back. All the longing and fear and hope of the past 3 days pouring into this one perfect, impossible moment. His lips were warm despite the cold night, gentle but urgent. And Emma felt something break open inside her, all the walls she'd built, all the distance she'd maintained, crumbling in the face of this connection she couldn't deny. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I want to stay," he whispered. "I want to stay so badly." "I want you to stay," Emma said, her hands fisted in his shirt. "But we both know you can't." "Not yet," Jack said, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. "But Emma, I swear to you, I will find a way to fix this. I will find a way to keep Riley safe and come back to you. I don't know how yet, but I will." Emma wanted to believe him, wanted it so desperately it hurt. But she'd seen too many impossible situations in her career, knew too well how the world worked. Sometimes wanting wasn't enough. Sometimes love wasn't enough. "Promise me something," she said instead. "Promise me you'll keep Riley safe, no matter what. That's all that matters." "I promise," Jack said, and she heard the absolute commitment in his voice. "But I'm promising you something else too. This isn't goodbye forever. I'm coming back, Emma, even if it takes months, years. I'm coming back." Emma kissed him again, softer this time, trying to memorize everything about this moment, the taste of him, the feel of his arms around her, the way the lighthouse beam swept over them in its eternal rotation. They stood together on the porch until the cold drove them inside, and then they sat on the couch in front of the dying fire, Emma tucked against Jack's side, neither of them willing to waste their last hours together on sleep. They talked about everything and nothing: Jack's time in the Navy, Emma's childhood in New Hampshire, Riley's love of dinosaurs, and her dream of becoming a paleontologist, the life they might have had if circumstances were different. As the night deepened, Emma felt Jack's breathing slow and even out, felt him finally relax into sleep. She stayed awake, watching the play of dying firelight across his face, committing every detail to memory. Tomorrow he would leave, and she would go back to her solitary life on the island. But something had shifted fundamentally in these 3 days. Emma had remembered who she was beneath the grief and failure, someone who fought for people, who didn't give up, who believed in the possibility of hope even in impossible situations. And as the first grey light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Emma made a decision. She wasn't going to let Jack face this alone. Emma woke to find herself alone on the couch, a blanket tucked carefully around her shoulders. Morning light streamed through the windows, and she could hear movement upstairs, Jack and Riley getting ready to leave. She stood, folding the blanket with deliberate care, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. Her decision from the early hours of morning still held. She wasn't letting them disappear into an uncertain future without doing everything she could to help. Jack came downstairs carrying their bags, his expression carefully neutral, but Emma could see the pain in his eyes. Riley followed, still in her pajamas, looking small and lost. "Coffee?" Emma offered, proud that her voice was steady. "Please," Jack said, setting the bags by the door. "Riley, go get dressed, okay? We need to leave soon." Riley nodded and trudged back upstairs, her movements slow and reluctant. Once she was out of earshot, Jack moved closer to Emma, his presence filling the small kitchen. "About last night," he started, but Emma shook her head. "Don't apologize," she said firmly. "Don't you dare apologize." "I wasn't going to," Jack said with a ghost of a smile. "I was going to say thank you for everything." Emma poured 2 mugs of coffee, then turned to face him fully. "I've been thinking," she said, "about your situation, about what options you have." Jack's expression became guarded. "Emma, hear me out," she said. "You can't keep running forever. Eventually, Vanessa's investigator will find you, or you'll run out of money, or Riley will get sick again and you won't be able to get her help. Running isn't a solution, it's just delaying the inevitable. I know that, Jack said, frustration edging into his voice. But what choice do I have? The system already decided I'm the bad guy. Then we change the narrative, Emma said. We build a case that's so strong, so well documented, that even Vanessa's lawyers can't ignore it. Jack stared at her. How? Emma had spent half the night thinking about this, drawing on years of experience navigating family court systems. First, we need evidence. Real, documented evidence of the abuse. Medical records, testimonies, anything that proves what Marcus did to Riley. I have photos, Jack said. Documentation from the night I took her. But the court's already dismissed it as unreliable. Because you were the only one presenting it, Emma said. You need independent corroboration. Someone who isn't the father with a custody dispute. Someone objective. Like who? Like a licensed social worker with a decade of experience in child welfare cases, Emma said quietly. Jack went very still. You. Me, Emma confirmed. I can do an independent assessment of Riley, document her statements, create a report that would carry weight in court. I still have my credentials, still have contacts in the system. Emma, no, Jack said immediately. I can't ask you to do that. If you get involved, if you help us, you could lose everything, your job, your reputation, maybe even face charges for aiding a fugitive. You're not asking, Emma said. I'm offering. And yes, it's a risk. But I didn't leave my career because I was afraid of risks. I left because I felt powerless. This helping you and Riley, this is a chance to do something that actually matters. Jack looked torn, caught between hope and fear. Even if you could do an assessment, even if we had all the evidence in the world, Vanessa's lawyers would still destroy us. They have too much money, too many connections. Money and connections aren't everything, Emma said. Sometimes the truth is enough. And if it's not, if we can't win through legal channels, then at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have documentation that might help you in the future, that might keep you out of jail if you're caught. You've really thought this through, Jack said wonderingly. I spent all night thinking it through, Emma admitted. Jack, I know I said I wasn't going to make promises about the future, but here's the truth. I can't just let you walk away. I can't go back to my safe, isolated life and wonder if Riley's okay, if you're okay. I need to help. It's who I am. Jack set down his coffee mug and pulled Emma into his arms, holding her tight. You're sure? He murmured into her hair. Once we start this, there's no going back. I'm sure, Emma said, her face pressed against his chest. But we need to be smart about it, strategic. She pulled back enough to look up at him. You and Riley can't keep running, that's not sustainable. But you also can't just turn yourselves in without leverage. So here's what I'm thinking. You stay here on the island for a few more weeks. I'll do a thorough assessment of Riley, document everything, and reach out to some contacts. I have people I trust who might be willing to help. A few more weeks? Jack said, and Emma saw hope flare in his eyes before he tamped it down. Emma, that's too dangerous. If Vanessa's investigator traces us here, how would they trace you? Emma interrupted. You're traveling by boat, staying off the grid, using cash. And this island, it's barely on any map. The only people who come here regularly are the supply boat once a week and the occasional tourist in summer, which is long over. If you keep a low profile, don't go into town, stay at the cottage, you could hide here for months and no one would know. Jack looked torn, clearly wanting to believe, but afraid to hope. What about your job? Won't people wonder why you're suddenly keeping visitors? I'm the lighthouse keeper, Emma said. I'm supposed to be solitary and eccentric, and I have family visiting. That's all anyone needs to know. My niece and her father, if anyone asks, which they probably won't. Emma. Jack, please, Emma said, putting all her conviction into the words. Let me help you. Let me do what I trained for years to do. Give me a chance to make a difference for one family, even if I couldn't for Maria Moreno. She saw the moment he made the decision, saw something shift in his expression, from resistance to acceptance. Okay, he said quietly, we'll stay. But Emma, if at any point this gets too dangerous, if there's any sign that someone's looking for us, we leave immediately. I won't put you at risk. Agreed, Emma said. then stood on her toes and kissed him, sealing their pact. Riley came downstairs then, dressed and ready, her small backpack on her shoulders. She stopped when she saw them, looking between her father and Emma with confusion. "Are we going?" she asked quietly. Jack knelt down to her level. "How would you feel about staying here a little longer?" he asked gently. "Emma's offered to help us, and this is a good place to be while we figure things out." Riley's face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. "Really? We can stay?" "Really?" Jack confirmed, and Riley threw her arms around him, then ran to Emma and hugged her too. "Thank you, Emma," Riley said, her voice muffled against Emma's sweater. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Emma blinked back tears and hugged the little girl close. "You're welcome, sweetheart," she said. Over Riley's head, Emma met Jack's eyes, and what passed between them was more than gratitude, more than attraction. It was partnership, commitment, the beginning of something that felt like family. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both natural and surreal. Emma continued her lighthouse duties, but now she came home to a cottage filled with life. Jack cooked meals, fixed things that had been broken for months, and gradually began to relax in a way Emma suspected he hadn't in years. Riley flourished, her cough disappeared, her color returned, and she spent hours exploring the island, collecting shells and sea glass, watching the seals and learning the names of seabirds from Emma's field guides. Emma began the careful work of documenting Riley's case. She conducted gentle interviews with the little girl, using techniques she'd developed over years of working with traumatized children, art therapy, play therapy, creating a safe space where Riley could share her story at her own pace. What emerged was heartbreaking and infuriating in equal measure. Marcus had been systematically abusing Riley for months, not just physically, though the bruises Jack had documented were real, but emotionally and psychologically. Vanessa had either been oblivious or willfully blind, more concerned with maintaining her lifestyle and relationship than protecting her daughter. "He told me it was my fault," Riley said one afternoon, as she colored at the kitchen table while Emma took notes. "That I was bad, and that's why he had to punish me. Mommy said I needed to be better, to not make Marcus angry." Emma's heart clenched, but she kept her voice calm and supportive. "Riley, honey, none of that was your fault. Marcus was wrong to hurt you, and your mother should have protected you. You didn't do anything bad." "That's what Daddy says too," Riley said, carefully coloring inside the lines of a dolphin she was drawing. "But sometimes I still worry I was bad." "I know," Emma said gently, "and it's okay to have those feelings. But I want you to know, and I need you to believe, that you are a good, brave, wonderful person, and nothing that happened was your fault." Riley looked up at her with those wise hazel eyes. "Do you really believe that?" "With all my heart," Emma said, and meant it. At night, after Riley was asleep, Emma would compile her notes into formal reports, documenting everything with the careful precision required for court proceedings. Jack would sit beside her, reading through what she'd written, his jaw tight with suppressed rage at what his daughter had endured. "How do you do this?" he asked one night, his voice rough. "How do you hear these stories and not—" He broke off, unable to finish. "I do feel it," Emma said quietly. "Every story, every hurt. But I learned a long time ago that if I let the anger consume me, I can't help. So I channel it into action, into building cases that can actually make a difference." Jack reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "You're remarkable," he said, not for the first time. "I'm just doing what needs to be done," Emma replied, but she squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his touch. As the weeks passed, something else was happening alongside the case building. The three of them were becoming a family. Riley started calling Emma by name without hesitation, seeking her out for comfort when she had nightmares, asking her opinion on everything from what books to read to whether dolphins or whales were cooler. Jack and Emma fell into an easy domesticity, cooking together, sharing quiet moments on the porch after Riley went to bed, stealing kisses when they thought no one was looking. "I could get used to this," Jack said one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Riley was inside, absorbed in a puzzle. "Me too," Emma admitted, leaning into his warmth. It's funny I came here to be alone, and now I can't imagine this cottage without you both in it. Jack pressed a kiss to her temple. When this is over, he said, when Riley's safe and we don't have to hide anymore, I want this. You, me, Riley. A real family. Emma turned in his arms to face him. That's a big promise, she said softly. I know, Jack said. But Emma, I'm in love with you. I think I started falling the moment you opened your door in the storm. You're brave and kind, and you really see me in a way no one has in years. And Riley adores you. So yes, it's a big promise, but it's one I want to make. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too, she whispered. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again. But you and Riley, you've brought me back to life. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, the lighthouse beam beginning its nightly vigil. And for a moment, everything felt perfect. But perfection, Emma knew, was fragile. 3 weeks into their stay, Emma made contact with an old colleague, Sarah Mitchell, a family court attorney she'd worked with on dozens of cases in Boston. Sarah was one of the few people Emma trusted completely, someone who'd always put children first, even when it meant going against powerful interests. Emma called from the Lighthouse office, where she had a secure internet connection, and laid out the situation carefully, omitting any identifying details at first. Let me get this straight, Sarah said after Emma finished. You're helping a father who's technically a fugitive, documenting abuse allegations that have already been dismissed by one court, and going up against what sounds like serious money and influence. Yes, Emma said simply. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Tell me about the child, she said finally. Emma did, describing Riley's trauma, her resilience, the clear evidence of systematic abuse. As she spoke, she heard Sarah's breathing change, recognized the shift from professional skepticism to personal investment. Okay, Sarah said when Emma finished. I'll help. But Emma, this is going to be hard, really hard. If this family has the kind of connections you're describing, they're going to fight dirty. I know, Emma said, but we have to try. Send me everything you have, Sarah said. Your assessment reports, photos, documentation. I'll start building a case. And Emma, be careful. If they find out you're involved, they'll come after you too. Let them, Emma said, surprised by her own fierceness. That night, Emma told Jack about the conversation. They were in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner while Riley watched a nature documentary in the living room. Sarah thinks we have a shot, Emma said, handing Jack a plate to dry. It won't be easy, but with the documentation I've compiled, with Riley's testimony, if she's willing to give it, we might be able to reopen the custody case. Jack was quiet, his movements mechanical. What are the odds? He asked finally. Emma chose honesty. Not great, maybe 30%, but that's 30% better than you had before. And if we lose, at least we'll have tried, Emma said. And the documentation might help reduce any charges against you, might show that you were acting to protect Riley. Jack set down the dish towel and turned to face her. Emma, if we do this, if we really go forward with this, there's no going back. We'll be putting ourselves in the system's hands. If it goes wrong, I go to prison. And Riley, his voice cracked. I know, Emma said gently, moving closer. And I know I'm asking you to take a huge leap of faith. But Jack, you said it yourself. You can't run forever. At some point you have to stand and fight. What if fighting isn't enough? Emma took his hands, looking up into his worried eyes. Then we fight harder. And if we lose, at least we'll know we did everything we could. But Jack, I believe we can win this. I've seen the system work when good people refuse to give up. And we're good people fighting for a good cause. Jack pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. How did I get so lucky? He murmured. Finding you, finding this place. I think we found each other, Emma said. Right when we both needed it most. The decision was made. They would move forward with the legal case. Sarah began filing motions to reopen the custody dispute, armed with Emma's comprehensive assessment and documentation. It would take time, maybe months, but they were committed to seeing it through. In the meantime, life on the island continued. November turned to December, and the first snows dusted the Lighthouse tower. Riley had never experienced a proper New England winter, and her excitement was infectious, building snowmen on the rocky beach, catching snowflakes on her tongue, learning to ice skate on the frozen puddles behind the cottage. Emma watched Jack watch his daughter, saw the wonder and love in his eyes, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. This was what she'd been missing in her years of social work, not just helping families, but being part of one, being loved and needed and essential. One morning in mid-December, Emma woke to find Jack already up, standing at the bedroom window. They'd been sharing her room for the past 2 weeks, a natural progression that neither had questioned. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately alert. "There's a boat," Jack said, his voice tight. "Not the supply boat, something else. It's been circling the island for the past 10 minutes. Emma's pulse spiked. She joined him at the window, and sure enough, there was a sleek white boat moving slowly around the island's perimeter. "Could be fishermen," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Wrong type of boat," Jack said. "That's expensive, new, and they're not fishing, they're searching." Emma felt cold dread settle in her stomach. "What do we do?" Jack was already moving, pulling on clothes, his military training kicking in. "Wake Riley, get her dressed warmly, pack a bag with essentials clothes, medicine, all your documentation. If they come ashore, we need to be ready to move." "Jack, Emma, please," he said, his grey eyes intense. "I need to know you and Riley can get out if this goes bad." Emma wanted to argue, but she saw the fear beneath his control and nodded. They moved quickly, efficiently, years of training and instinct taking over. Riley woke confused, but picked up on the tension immediately, getting dressed without complaint. 20 minutes later, they were ready, bags packed, escape routes planned. The boat was still there, now anchored just off the southern shore. Then they heard the sound of an engine, smaller, coming closer. Someone was coming ashore. "Stay here," Jack said, his voice hard. "Keep Riley inside. If I give the signal 3 sharp whistles, you run for the North Cove where my boat is hidden. You get in that boat and you go. Understand?" "I'm not leaving you," Emma said fiercely. "You will if it means keeping Riley safe," Jack said. And Emma knew he was right. He moved to the door, and Emma grabbed his arm. "Be careful," she said. Jack kissed her hard and fast. "Always," he said. Then he was gone. Emma pulled Riley close, both of them watching from the window as a figure emerged from the small inflatable boat that had come ashore. A white man, tall, wearing expensive outdoor gear that looked pristine and out of place on the rocky beach. Jack met him halfway between the cottage and the shore, his stance casual but ready. Emma couldn't hear what they were saying, but she saw the man gesture toward the cottage, saw Jack shake his head, his body language becoming more defensive. "Is that Marcus?" Riley whispered, her small hand gripping Emma's tightly. Emma looked more closely at the man's face-sharp features, cold eyes even from this distance, an arrogance in the way he held himself. "I think so," she said quietly. "I'm scared," Riley said. "Me too, sweetheart," Emma admitted, pulling the little girl closer. "But your daddy's not going to let anything happen to us." The conversation on the beach was getting heated. Emma could see it in their body language, in the way Marcus stepped closer, aggressive, and Jack held his ground. Then Marcus pulled something from his jacket, a phone, Emma realized, holding it up as if showing Jack something on the screen. Jack went very still. Even from the cottage, Emma could see the tension radiating from him. Whatever Marcus had shown him had changed the dynamic completely. Then Jack looked back at the cottage, directly at the window where Emma and Riley stood. His expression was anguished, torn, and Emma felt her blood run cold. "No," she whispered. "Jack, no." But she knew what was coming, even before Jack gave 3 sharp whistles the signal to run. Emma didn't hesitate. She grabbed Riley's hand and the emergency bag, and they were out the back door in seconds, running through the sparse winter woods toward the North Cove. Behind them, she could hear shouting, but she didn't look back, couldn't look back. Riley kept pace beside her, her small legs pumping, her breath coming in sharp gasps. They reached the cove in minutes that felt like hours, and Emma's hands shook as she pulled the tarp off Jack's boat. "Get in," she told Riley, lifting the little girl over the side. "Stay down." Emma fumbled with the ropes, her social worker hands unused to nautical knots, but finally got them free. She started the engine Jack had shown her how and began to navigate out of the cove. That's when she heard a sound that made her heart stop. A gunshot. "Daddy!" Riley screamed, trying to stand up in the boat. "Riley, stay down," Emma commanded, her voice sharp with fear. She reached back and pulled the little girl into a crouch, shielding her with her body. But Emma couldn't leave, not without knowing if Jack was okay, not without trying to help. She cut the engine and anchored the boat just inside the cove's entrance, hidden but ready to move. "Riley," she said, gripping the little girl's shoulders, "I need you to be very brave. Stay in this boat. Stay hidden. If anyone comes who isn't me or your daddy, you start this engine, push this button, and you drive as fast as you can to the mainland. Can you do that?" Riley's eyes were huge with terror, but she nodded. "Where are you going?" "To get your daddy," Emma said, and kissed Riley's forehead. "I promise I'll come back." Emma ran back through the woods, her heart pounding, her mind racing through every worst-case scenario. She emerged from the trees near the cottage and stopped, taking in the scene. Jack was on his knees on the beach, hands behind his head. Marcus stood over him, holding a gun not pointed at Jack, but casually, like it was a phone or a set of keys. The shot Emma had heard must have been a warning, not an attempt to kill. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by a cold, calculating fury. Emma had spent a decade de-escalating dangerous situations. She knew how to read people, how to find their pressure points, how to use her presence to shift the power dynamic. And Marcus Caldwell, with his expensive clothes and his casual arrogance, was exactly the type of man she'd dealt with before. She stepped out onto the beach, her hands visible, her posture non-threatening but confident. "Mr. Caldwell," she called out, her voice steady. "I'm Emma Castellano. I'm a licensed social worker, and I think we should talk." Marcus turned to look at her, his expression a mixture of surprise and calculation. Up close, Emma could see he was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s, handsome in a cold, sculpted way. His eyes were the kind that evaluated everything in terms of value and threat. "Emma Castellano," he said, his voice smooth and educated. "The lighthouse keeper who's been harboring a fugitive. I did my research on you too. Former social worker, left Boston after a client committed suicide. Must have been tough." Emma didn't flinch, though the casual mention of Maria Moreno's death felt like a slap. "Where's Riley?" Marcus asked, looking around. "Safe," Emma said simply. "Emma, go," Jack said, his voice tight with desperation. "Take Riley and go." "Nobody's going anywhere," Marcus said, his tone still conversational. "At least not until we have a conversation. You see, Jack here has put Vanessa through hell for the past 3 months. She's been worried sick about her daughter." "Worried enough to notice Marcus was abusing her," Emma said, her voice sharp. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance, maybe, or recognition that Emma wasn't going to be easily intimidated. "Abuse is a strong word," he said. "Riley is a difficult child who requires firm discipline. Jack has always been too soft on her. Firm discipline that leaves bruises," Emma said. "That terrifies a 7-year-old. That's not discipline, Mr. Caldwell. That's abuse, and I have documentation to prove it." "Documentation that won't matter," Marcus said, his voice hardening slightly. "Jack kidnapped Riley. That's a felony. The police are on their way right now. I called them from the boat. Jack will go to prison and Riley will come home where she belongs." Emma's mind raced. Police meant minutes, not hours. They didn't have time for the slow legal process Sarah had been building. They needed something now. Something that would stop this before it spiraled completely out of control. "You know what I find interesting, Mr. Caldwell?" Emma said, taking a calculated risk. "You came here alone. Not with the police, not with Vanessa. Just you, with a gun. Why is that?" Marcus's expression shifted slightly, a tell Emma recognized. She'd hit something. I'm here to bring Riley home to her mother, he said, but there was a defensive edge to his voice now. No, Emma said, taking a step closer, her voice gaining strength. You're here to make sure Riley doesn't talk. You're here because you know that if this goes to court, if Riley testifies, if my assessment is entered into evidence, you're going to face charges. Assault, child abuse, maybe more. And no amount of money or connections can make that disappear if there's enough evidence. You're reaching, Marcus said, but Emma could hear the uncertainty creeping in. Am I? Emma pulled her phone from her pocket. She'd grabbed it when they fled the cottage. Because I have video recordings of Riley's testimony. I have photographs of her injuries. I have a comprehensive assessment that details systematic abuse. And I've already sent copies to a family court attorney who's filing motions as we speak. This was only partially true. Emma had the documentation, but she hadn't sent everything to Sarah yet. But Marcus didn't know that. If the police come, Emma continued, pressing her advantage, and they find you here, holding a gun, threatening the father who was trying to protect his daughter from you, how do you think that looks? Especially when my evidence comes out. Especially when Riley testifies about what you did to her. Marcus's hand tightened on the gun, and for a moment, Emma thought she'd pushed too hard. But then she saw something else in his eyes: calculation, the weighing of options. You're bluffing, he said, but he didn't sound certain. Am I? Emma held up her phone. I can call my attorney right now. Have her file an emergency motion. With the evidence I have, I can get Riley placed in protective custody while the case is reviewed. That means she won't go back to Vanessa. She won't go back to you. And if she testifies when she testifies, you're done. Emma took another step forward, her voice dropping to something quieter but no less intense. Or you could leave, right now. Tell Vanessa you couldn't find them. Let this play out through the legal system without you here, muddying the waters with threats and guns. Maybe if you're smart, you distance yourself from Vanessa before this all comes crashing down. Maybe you claim you never knew what was really happening. Maybe you walk away from this without criminal charges. The beach was silent, except for the sound of waves and the distant cry of gulls. Emma could see Marcus thinking, could almost watch the calculation happening behind his cold eyes. You're giving me an out, he said finally. I'm giving you a choice, Emma corrected. Stay and face the consequences when all of this comes to light. Or leave, and maybe you avoid prosecution if you're smart about how you handle things from here. Marcus looked at Jack, still kneeling on the beach, then back at Emma. She could see the moment he made his decision, the slight relaxation of his shoulders, the lowering of the gun. This isn't over, he said, but there was no real threat in his voice now. Just the statement of a fact. No, Emma agreed. It's not, but it will be fought in court, not here. Marcus holstered his gun. Emma could see now it was in a shoulder holster under his jacket and backed toward his inflatable boat. Riley belongs with her mother, he said. Riley belongs somewhere safe, Emma said firmly. That's what the court will decide. Marcus didn't respond, just climbed into his boat and started the motor. Within minutes, he was heading back to the larger vessel anchored offshore. Jack stayed frozen on the beach until the boats were out of sight. Then he surged to his feet and pulled Emma into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. What the hell were you thinking? He said, his voice rough with emotion. I told you to run. I told you to take Riley and go. I couldn't leave you, Emma said, her face pressed against his chest. I couldn't. Jack pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands. You could have been killed. That psychopath had a gun. But he didn't use it, Emma said. Because men like Marcus Caldwell are ultimately cowards. They rely on intimidation and power. But when someone calls their bluff, when someone threatens their carefully constructed image, they back down. You were bluffing, Jack said, realization dawning, about having already sent everything to your attorney. Mostly, Emma admitted. But he didn't know that. And now, we actually need to send everything to Sarah. Because Marcus isn't going to stay away forever. He's going to regroup, talk to Vanessa, probably get lawyers involved. We need to be ready. Riley, Jack said suddenly, pulling away. Where is she? Safe in your boat at the North Cove, Emma said. Come on. They ran together back through the woods and found Riley exactly where Emma had left her, crouched in the boat with wide, frightened eyes. When she saw her father, she burst into tears and launched herself into his arms. "Daddy, Daddy, I was so scared," she sobbed. "I heard the gun and I thought. "I'm okay, Riley Bear," Jack said, his voice breaking. "I'm okay. We're all okay." Emma wrapped her arms around both of them, and they stood like that for a long moment, a makeshift family holding each other together. Back at the cottage, Emma immediately got to work. She uploaded all her documentation to a secure cloud server, sent everything to Sarah with a detailed explanation of what had just happened, and began preparing for what she knew would be a legal battle. Jack stayed close to Riley, clearly shaken by how close they'd come to disaster. The little girl was quiet, processing everything in that way children do, and Emma's heart ached for all she'd been through. Sarah called back within an hour, her voice tight with urgency. "Emma, what you've sent me, this is solid, really solid. I'm filing an emergency motion first thing tomorrow morning. But you need to understand this is going to get ugly. Vanessa's lawyers are going to fight hard, and if this Marcus guy really did threaten you with a gun, you need to report that." "I will," Emma said. "But Sarah, what are our chances?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Better than they were. Your assessment is comprehensive, professional, and damning. Riley's testimony, if she's willing to give it, could be the deciding factor. And if Marcus really did show up with a gun, that's going to look very bad for their side. But they have money and influence," Sarah said bluntly. "And Jack did technically kidnap Riley, even if it was to protect her. The court might look favorably on his motives, but it's still a crime. This could go either way." "Then we fight," Emma said simply. "Then we fight," Sarah agreed. The next few weeks were a blur of legal motions, depositions, and preparation. Sarah filed for emergency custody review, citing Emma's assessment and the documented evidence of abuse. Vanessa's lawyers responded with their own motions, painting Jack as an unstable veteran who'd manipulated a lonely social worker into supporting his delusions. But something had shifted in the case. Marcus's appearance with a gun, even though Emma had chosen not to report it officially, had clearly spooked him. He distanced himself from Vanessa, suddenly claiming their relationship had been casual, that he barely knew Riley. The cracks in their story were starting to show. In late January, the hearing was scheduled. Jack would have to turn himself in, face the kidnapping charges, and trust that the system would see the truth. The night before they were set to leave for the mainland and the courthouse, Emma found Jack standing in the Lighthouse tower, looking out at the dark water. She climbed the stairs and stood beside him, their shoulders touching. "Scared?" she asked softly. "Terrified," Jack admitted. "What if we lose? What if I go to prison and Riley? Then I'll fight for her," Emma said firmly. "I'll petition for custody. I'll make sure she's safe. But Jack, I don't think we're going to lose. I think the truth is too strong this time." Jack turned to face her, the lighthouse beam sweeping over them in its eternal rotation. "When this is over," he said, "when Riley's safe and I'm not a fugitive anymore, I want to marry you, Emma Castellano. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, right here in this lighthouse if that's what you want, or anywhere else in the world. I just want to be with you." Emma felt tears slide down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." They kissed there in the lighthouse, surrounded by light and promise, and for a moment, Emma could see their future, could see a life built, not despite the darkness they'd both survived, but because of it. The courthouse in Portland was imposing, all granite and authority. Emma held Riley's hand on one side while Jack walked on the other, flanked by police officers who'd agreed to let him come voluntarily rather than in handcuffs. Sarah met them at the entrance, crisp and professional in her suit. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," Emma said, squeezing Riley's hand. The hearing was everything Emma had feared and hoped for. Vanessa's lawyers painted Jack as dangerous, Emma as misguided, Riley as a confused child being manipulated by her father. But Sarah was brilliant, methodically presenting Emma's assessment, the photographs, the documented testimony. And then Riley took the stand. Emma had prepared her as much as she could, but watching this brave 7-year-old tell her story to a courtroom full of strangers was one of the hardest things Emma had ever witnessed. Riley was quiet but clear, answering the judge's gentle questions about what Marcus had done, about how scared she'd been, about how her daddy had saved her. When Vanessa's lawyer tried to suggest that Riley had been coached, Riley looked at him with those wise hazel eyes and said simply, "I know what happened to me. Nobody told me what to say. I'm just telling the truth." The judge, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness, took a week to make her decision. It was the longest week of Emma's life, spent back on the island with Riley, while Jack remained in protective custody. When the call came, Emma's hands shook as she answered. "We won," Sarah said, and Emma could hear the smile in her voice. "Full custody to Jack, with supervised visitation for Vanessa, only if she completes parenting classes and therapy. The judge cited your assessment heavily in her decision, Emma. And Jack, the kidnapping charges are being dropped. The judge ruled that he acted to protect his daughter from imminent harm. He's free." Emma sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "He's free," she repeated. "He's free," Sarah confirmed. And Emma, the judge, had some words for Vanessa and Marcus. She's referring the case to the DA for possible criminal charges against Marcus for child abuse. This is a big win. Riley came running when she heard Emma crying, and Emma scooped her up, spinning her around. "Your daddy's coming home," she said. "Riley, he's coming home." 3 days later, Jack stepped off the ferry onto Gulls Point Island, and Emma and Riley were there to meet him. Riley launched herself into his arms, and Jack held her tight, his face buried in her curls, his shoulders shaking with relief and joy. Then he looked up at Emma, and the love in his eyes took her breath away. "Let's go home," he said. Home. The word had never sounded so perfect. 6 months later, on a brilliant summer afternoon, Emma and Jack were married on the beach below the lighthouse. Riley served as flower girl and ring bearer, her smile bright as the sun. Sarah came, along with a handful of island residents who'd become friends, and the ceremony was simple and perfect. Emma wore a simple white dress and wildflowers in her hair. Jack wore a suit that made his grey eyes seem even more intense, and when he said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "Emma, you saved us," he said. "You gave us shelter in the storm, and then you gave us so much more hope, family, a future. I promise to spend every day of my life making sure you never regret opening that door." Emma's vows were simpler. "Jack, you and Riley didn't just find shelter here, you found home. And so did I. I promise to always be your lighthouse, your safe harbor, your constant light in any storm." When they kissed, Riley cheered, and the small gathering applauded, and the lighthouse beam began its evening rotation, blessing their union with its steady presence. That night, after Riley had fallen asleep in her room, newly decorated with posters of dinosaurs, and the ocean, Emma and Jack stood on their porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. "Happy?" Jack asked, his arm around her waist. "So happy I can barely breathe," Emma admitted. "You? I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again," Jack said quietly. "But here, with you, with Riley sleeping soundly for the first time in years, this is more than safety. This is peace." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his presence. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "The storm, when you knocked on my door." "Every day," Jack said. "I think about how close we came to never finding this place, never finding you. If the storm had pushed us a different direction, if you'd turned us away, I could never have turned you away," Emma interrupted gently. "The moment I saw Riley's face, I knew I'd do whatever it took to help." "I know," Jack said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "It's who you are. A lighthouse in every sense, guiding lost souls to safety." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the beam sweep across the dark water, its eternal promise of guidance and hope. In the distance, Emma could see the lights of a passing ship, following the lighthouse's call to safe passage. "I got a call from Sarah yesterday," Emma said. "She wanted to let me know Marcus accepted a plea deal. 2 years probation, mandatory therapy, and a restraining order keeping him away from Riley. He'll never be able to hurt her again. Jack's arm tightened around her. And Vanessa? She's in therapy, Emma said. Sarah says she's actually showing up, doing the work. Maybe someday if Riley wants it, they might be able to have some kind of relationship. But that's Riley's choice to make when she's ready. I never wanted to keep Riley from her mother, Jack said quietly. I just wanted her to be safe. I know, Emma said. And now she is. Now you both are. A light came on in Riley's window. She must have woken up. A moment later, the little girl appeared on the porch, rubbing her eyes. I had a dream, Riley said, her voice still thick with sleep. A good dream. We were all together, and we were flying over the ocean, and I wasn't scared at all. Emma opened her arms, and Riley climbed into her lap, snuggling close. Jack wrapped his arms around both of them, and they sat like that, three people who'd found each other in the storm and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their separate pasts. You're not scared anymore, are you, Riley Bear? Jack asked softly. Riley thought about it seriously. Not really, she said. Sometimes I get a little scared, but then I remember I have you and Emma, and the lighthouse always keeps us safe. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears. Tears of joy and gratitude for this unexpected family she'd been given. She thought of Maria Moreno, of the family she hadn't been able to save, and sent up a silent prayer of thanks that she'd been given a second chance to make a difference. The lighthouse will always keep us safe, Emma agreed, her voice full of conviction. And so will we, as long as we're together. As the stars wheeled overhead and the lighthouse beam continued its faithful rotation, Emma Castellano Mercer held her family close and knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The lighthouse stood strong and steady, just as it had for nearly a century, guiding lost souls home. And inside the keeper's cottage, three hearts beat in rhythm, finally, beautifully, at peace. 2 years later, Emma stood in her office, the converted storage room in the lighthouse tower, reviewing case files. She'd started taking on consulting work again, offering her expertise to social workers and attorneys handling difficult custody cases. It felt good to be using her skills, to be making a difference, but on her own terms now. Through the window, she could see Jack and Riley on the beach below. Riley now 9 and growing taller every day, her confidence blooming like wildflowers in spring. They were building something, a sandcastle, maybe, or one of Riley's elaborate marine biology experiments. Jack had found work too, using his Navy experience to teach boat safety and navigation to locals and summer visitors. He was patient and skilled, and the islanders had welcomed him into their community. The fugitive who'd arrived in a storm was now simply Jack Mercer, the lighthouse keeper's husband, Riley's father, a good man who'd done what he had to do to protect his daughter. Emma's phone buzzed a text from Sarah. Another referral for you. Father fighting for custody. System not listening. Sound familiar? Think you can help? Emma smiled and typed back, send me the details. I'll see what I can do. Because that's what she did now. She helped families find their way through impossible situations. She was a lighthouse in more ways than one, guiding people through their darkest storms towards safe harbor. Riley's laughter drifted up from the beach, bright and free, and Emma's heart swelled with love. This child who'd been so hurt, so scared, was thriving now, getting straight A's in school, making friends, talking excitedly about becoming a marine biologist when she grew up. She'd even started having supervised visits with Vanessa again, brief, carefully monitored meetings that were slowly, tentatively, rebuilding something between them. It would never be what it should have been, but it was something. And that was enough. Emma heard footsteps on the stairs and turned to find Jack climbing up to her office, his hair windblown, his smile easy. Riley wants to know if we're having fish for dinner, he said, crossing to kiss Emma hello. She caught 3 mackerel off the dock and is very proud. Fish it is, Emma said, laughing. Though I reserve the right to add vegetables. Jack pulled her close, his arms warm and strong around her. Have I told you today that I love you? Only twice, Emma said, her eyes sparkling. You're slacking. I love you, Jack said, his voice serious now. I love our life. I love that Riley is safe and happy. I love that we get to help other families find their way. I love everything about this life we've built together." Emma reached up and cupped his face, studying the features she'd come to know so well, the scar on his jaw, the laugh lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when they met, the peace in his expression that came from finally being safe. "I love you too," she said simply. "And I'd do it all again, every risk, every moment of fear to end up right here." They kissed, slow and sweet, and through the window, the lighthouse beam began its nightly rotation, faithful as always, guiding ships safely home. Below, Riley called out that she'd caught a fourth fish, and Emma and Jack laughed together, breaking apart to head down to their daughter, to their dinner, to their beautifully ordinary evening in their extraordinary life. The lighthouse stood strong, the sea rolled eternal, and the Mercer family, born from storm and struggle, lived and loved and thrived, proof that even the darkest nights eventually give way to dawn.